Hey guys, welcome back. It's the Tri-State Time Machine, and I'm your host, Vanessa Hankins. It's October, so you know what that means. It's spooky story time. So let's jump right in. The river keeps secrets. I didn't come to the river to be found. I came because the water will carry anything if you let it. Minnows, driftwood, the light from a bar sign, a name you don't say out loud. The Ohio slides past Huntington like a lazy thought. Green, brown, and heavy, always bearing something that you can't see from the bank. This houseboat wasn't mine. It belonged to a mechanic who had taken a job in Lexington and told me that I could rent it cheap if I kept an eye on his anchors and I didn't talk too much at the marina store. It was tied off close to the mouth of Guyandotte, where the current braided up with the barges and the rumble of trains. Across the water, Chesapeake, silhouettes of backyards and porch lights. Further downriver, Ashland's bridges that looked like bones in the dusk. And east, the quiet line of Catlettsburg where the Big Sandy comes in like a second thought. At night, the boat ticked inside. The water talked to the hull. Nothing mystical, just physics. Though after a week, I realized something. I was hearing words in it. Not phrases, not language, just the cadence of something telling something that mattered. When the summer haze lay flat and the air didn't move, it came through the boards like radio static, a near voice that slid under whatever I was doing. When it got loud, I told myself it was fatigue. I told myself that a lot. There was a bar at the marina that had once been a bait shop. The old-timers nursed light beers and told stories. One white-bearded man kept a crisp fold of obituaries in his wallet, a habit he said he'd picked up from his father. He'd tap that little packet and say, "Everybody's in the river, one way or another." I didn't ask him to explain. On Wednesday nights, when the big boat pushed coal upriver and the current boiled, I would take my chair to the roof and sit with my feet on the edge, the houseboat swaying like a cradle. I would think of one thing that I didn't let myself think of. A winter parking lot, salt white, a girl wearing my coat, my car idling while I counted reasons and came up short. I told myself there were lines that you could cross and still come back over. You just had to keep moving, just like the river. The first time the words shaped themselves clear, I thought someone was talking on the dock below. I heard the boards creak and then the slow hush of the river against the pilings, and then, very distinctly, "Don't leave me." The voice wasn't a child's, and it wasn't grown either. It was the age you are when you learn the difference between silence and a secret. I went to the edge and looked down, but the water was thick and dark, flecked with the far-off glow of Ashland's bridge lights. A catfish rolled, and the ripple caught the reflection of a plane blinking overhead. I waited. The voice didn't come back. 2 days later, I passed a missing person flyer taped to the marina cooler. A teenage boy from Proctorville, gone now for 3 weeks. The photo made him look like the boys who sit with their heads down on school buses, pretending to be asleep. I stood there longer than I should have, long enough for the clerk to glance up twice. "I already told the deputy," she said, sliding a bag of ice onto the counter. "If he came through here, I didn't see him. That family's really torn up." "Any news?" I asked, and hated how thin it sounded. "River's high this month," she said, which really wasn't an answer. That evening, I took the John boat out, following the eddies where the Guyandotte fed in, and then drifting towards the open Ohio. Sunset made a path of bruised gold downriver toward Ashland. I cut the engine and let the current take me. The water smacked the aluminum hull in quiet, steady slaps, like a metronome of thoughts that you shouldn't keep. That's when I heard him again. Not through the wood this time, not a vibration that the river made on the boat, but out of the air, close to me as a whisper on my shoulder. "You know me." "I don't," I said into the dark. "I don't know you." "You do." It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it also wasn't unfamiliar either. It had the particularity of a memory that you've misfiled. You don't remember the content, but you remember the feeling of having known it once. My heart went strange, like a fist closing and opening. The current tugged me toward the main channel. I pulled the cord and the motor coughed awake. I pushed back against the subtle force of the river. On the way, the houseboat and I kept seeing a coat from the winter. Gray wool, too big for her, sleeves swallowing her hands. It was ridiculous. Coats and boys and old men with obituary folds. None of it connected, but the mind strings together even things that you don't want it to. Sometimes, especially then. That weekend, there was a fundraiser at Harris Riverfront Park. Food trucks, a band under the gazebo, kids skating past with river stones sticking out of their pockets. I stood at the rail and watched the water scallop against the riprap. Across the Ohio bank, it looked close enough to touch. A woman next to me held a cardboard sign with a missing boy's name. By nightfall, a circle of candles had made a broken halo around her feet. "Do you believe in closure?" she asked no one in particular. I didn't answer. I knew better than to say what I wanted, which was that there are some things that don't end. They just widen, until you live on one shore and your guilt stands on the other, calling across the channel that never narrows. Back on the boat, the voice waited, patient as floodwater. "You know where I went in." "I don't," I said. "I didn't see you." "You saw enough." I slept in quick, shallow dips, jolting awake in the hull or the cords that creaked. Around 3, a soft bump against the boat woke me. I got up and went outside. Bare feet, cold on the deck. Something pale moved against the water. A log, I told myself. But it was the lid of a cooler, scuffed white and green, turning slowly. I fished it with the boat hook. There was a name written on it, and the underside of the black marker faded into gray ghost. Not the boy's name, not any name that I knew. I left it on the dock. I didn't tell the clerk. On Sunday, the river rose. A rain in Pittsburgh or Marietta had sent its impossible distance downstream. The water swirled into the branches and bottles and sometimes a basketball. The Ohio remembers everything that you put in it. Just don't say it out loud unless you put your ear in the right place. That night I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I got in my truck and I drove to Catlettsburg, to the place where the Big Sandy meets the Ohio. There's a thin reach of grass there, a little park with a view like a story you're not finished telling. You can see the water of the river pour into the other and how it takes its time, longer than you think, before they come to one color. A man stood there in a deputy's jacket, hands in his pockets. He had a tired face that suggested he was often called to carry other people's worst. I nodded, and he nodded back. The shrill night and sex softened and resumed. "You here for the same reason as me?" he asked without looking. "Depend on what yours is," I said. "Family likes to come here and talk to the water," he said. "Some folks say it's crazy, but I've learned not to call anything crazy that helps a mother get through the night." The current made a sound of a match being drawn, and I said, "What if the water talks back?" He smiled in a way that might have been mistaken for pity if I weren't so tired. "Son, this whole country's water that talks back." "I'm not from here," I said, even though it didn't feel like a defense. "Nobody is," he said. "Everybody just washes up. Or doesn't." We stood there until a tow flashed its light and moved on. We finally turned to leave. The deputy said, "Whatever you're carrying, the river can take a lot, but it always leaves a little on the shore." Back on the houseboat, I sat at a little table with a map the mechanic had left, a laminated river chart with the mile markers and warnings about hidden obstructions. I traced my finger from the Guyandott's mouth to the first bend, and then to the point where the current runs fast along the West Virginia bank. I stopped where the chart had a note in tiny print. Submerged breeze reported. Low visibility. Caution. "There," the voice said, as if leaning over my shoulder. "There's where I went in. You turned your head." "I didn't see," I said, but the protest was weaker now, thinner than the paper on the chart. What did I not see? A boy on a bike? A splash? A shape caught and pulled under? Or had I driven past some other person's river while my own was rising? I took the John boat out at dawn, when the water is honest. Fog lay on the surface like steam rolling off a steeping animal. As I cut the engine, the silence came huge, the kind that you get before a storm makes up its mind or a jury comes back in. I let the current move me and counted the slow thuds of my heart. I passed a floating dock with 2 rusted bolts poking up like broken teeth. The fog thinned. The far bank slowed in a line of the willow shadows. I drifted. The map had been right. Here the current pushes harder, like it wanted to keep me, the way a bad thought keeps you even when you try to give it away. The voice was different now, not a whisper, just a presence that moved around the edges of my hearing, like a person walking a circle you can't see. You can tell them, the words fell without tone, what you saw. "I didn't see," I said again. My hands are sweating on their oar handles. I tried to picture the winter lot, a girl in my coat, the white exhaust. Then I tried to picture the boy's last exact moment, the one what no one ever gets out to keep. Was it a stumble on a slick rock? A dare gone sour? His lungs burn? Or did it go black like a knocked-out screen? Tell them, the present said. Tell them you heard me. Tell them where the current pulls. Tell them what you didn't do. A barge horn sounded upriver, so deep that it seemed to come from under my ribs. I sat very still, and the horn's echo made another shape in the fog. Then I pulled a slow circle, letting the boat drift over the place I thought the voice meant. I looked down, as if the Ohio had ever returned anything because you asked it nicely. The water showed me only myself, broken into pieces by the surface, doubled and redoubled, a smear of my eyes. I reached up into the river, up to my shoulder. It was colder than it should have been. I wagged my fingers around, absurd, as if I could brush a sleeve, a hand, a buoy. I pulled my arm out empty, a cold running up my bones. On the way back to the houseboat, I passed a woman with the sign standing at the rail again. She was alone. I wanted to say something stupid like I'm sorry. Sorry for your boy. Sorry for the way the river makes people into plural nouns. Son, brother, friend. Sorry for the way I used to think guilt came in like a flood when it came in like this. A steady rise until your front steps are kissed. That night, water sounded like many people talking at once in a room down the hall. Some of them were laughing, someone was crying, but softly, the way you do when you don't want to startle a sleeping child. The old-timer's words ticked in my head. Everybody's in the river. I took a pen and a page out of the mechanic's logbook and wrote a note to a stranger I had never met. It said, mile marker near the Guyan dot mouth, where the current leans hard towards the West Virginia bank. When the fog lifts, you can see where the color of the water changes. That's where it pools. I heard something there. I'm sorry. I didn't sign it. In the morning, I folded the note and walked to the park, to the ring of the candle wax on the concrete. There was no one there. I tucked the paper under a stone on the rail, where the rain would ruin it if the mother didn't find it first. If she did find it, what then? Would it help, or would it widen? Would she imagine a voice and hear the boy answer? I went back to the boat and packed a box of things that I'd arrived with. 3 shirts, a knife, a picture I kept face down of the girl wearing my coat. I put the picture in the river. It flared, then turned to a gray fish that current took. It didn't matter. The memory had never lived in paper. The marina clerk looked at me a long time when I returned the keys. You get any sleep out there, she asked. Place creeps me out at night. Sometimes, I said. She flicked her eyes to the cooler lid, and I'd left leaning against the ice chest. You bring that in? No, I lied, and tasted metal. I drove east on Route 60, past the half-finished morning, past places with names that had always sounded temporary to me. Barbersville, Ona, Milton. I kept thinking I should turn back. I kept thinking I already had, and just hadn't noticed. When I hit a red light just outside of Culloden, a deputy from Clattersburg was in the lane over, driving the other direction. He nodded once, like we were neighbors who shared a fence for years, and then he was gone. By the time I reached the next county line, it had started to rain. A fine mist at first, then a steadier sheet. The road slicked up, the tires sang. In the rear view, the direction of the river was thought you could follow, but if you wanted to, and if you were ready to listen to its talk, not just the parts that sounded like mercy, but the parts that sounded like tell them. You can draw your own ending here. Maybe the mother found the note and it led them to the bend. Maybe the deputy came because he was just as short of a man who has every answers and every ache. Maybe they pulled nothing from the water because the river has its own stubborn chronology. Or maybe they did. In a town that already knew how to grieve, learned another, quieter way. As for me, I can tell you what the water said last night, very clearly, as if it had finally decided to stop being a river and be only a mouth. You didn't throw me in, but you left me there. Some things the river keeps. Some things it sends back in a language you'll never admit you speak. I kept driving until the rain made a whole day into the inside of a shell. I said nothing to the next person I met about voices or boys or maps. But when I passed a body of water, even a ditch shining after a storm, I listen. Sometimes it sounds like sorrow, sometimes like relief, and sometimes it sounds exactly like my own name, spoken by a mouthful of river. This is the hollow beneath us. I agreed to go to the underground because I didn't think the dark could tell me anything that I didn't already know. That was my first mistake. The second was bringing friends. I had picked a warm Friday at the end of summer when the leaves still had heat in them and the cicadas sang like static. Wayne National Forest isn't one forest so much as it is patches of trees stitched across hills and hollers, where small towns give way to fields and fields give way to ravines that smell like pennies. We turned off the county road into a gravel lane that showed fresh tire tracks, but not ours. Curving around a locked gate, behind it, the land sloped into a seas of shade. The mine opening looked like a mouth of a doctor is about to examine. A hand-painted sign nailed to a post that said "Keep Out" in letters that had bled in the rain and dried that way. Drew laughed and took a photo. Lena touched the sign with her fingers, as if it were not a warning but a pulse. I told myself that we were making a podcast episode, and that made it noble. I told myself more things than that. "What's the plan?" Drew asked, already setting up the recorder. The big one, not the phone. The one that hears more than we do. Mara, who had asked us here, who called our show Under the Hallow and believed that the title should be taken literally, took a breath as if drawing a hole of this hollow was part of the ritual. "We document," she said. "We don't provoke. We note our impressions and timestamps and physical sensations. We don't go far. We don't get brave. And if anybody feels wrong, we leave." The word wrong lingered like a taste. Lena nodded. Drew shrugged. I said, "I'll be fine," in the tone people use when they're trying to convince their lungs to keep breathing. Inside, the air hit us like an old cellar, cool and damp with a tang of iron. Our headlamps curved shallow white ovals into the walls that had once been picked up by hands and then cut by machines. The mine's mouth narrowed into the corridor, then opened into a room long enough that I ducked even though I didn't need to. The floor was a mosaic of shell and discarded things, a rusted can, a boot without its pair, a loop of wire. Water plinked from the ceiling and into the puddles that reflected our lamps as stars, convincing nobody but themselves. "Rolling," Drew said. The recorder's little red light winked like a steady eye. I said the time out loud. Lena described the smell. "Metallic, faintly sweet, like a spoon you've held too long," Mara said. "If anyone is here that wants to tell us something, we're listening." In her soft teacher voice, the one that makes even strangers want to confess. Silence layered itself over the drip, drip, drip. There's a point in a quiet room where you begin to hear your own body as a noise. The shallow, the rustle of fabric, the soft whine in your ear that may be bones or a memory. "I feel dizzy," Lena said, "like the floor is moving." "It's not," Drew said, not unkindly. We moved deeper. We did not go far, not at first. The passage bent left, then right, like it had been laid by a man trying to avoid something. Our breath fogged, then did not. We passed a seam of coal that winked in its eye like our lights. The drip became a runnel. A bright thread running down the wall made a small, clean path among the dust. "Do you hear that?" Mara asked after 10 minutes. "Under the water?" I listened. At first, all I heard was the idea of hearing. Then, as if someone had shifted in the mine one notch closer to us, I heard a low sound like a radio catching a station beyond its reach. A voice waited at the edge of it. I couldn't tell if it was behind the wall or inside my head. "Timestamp," Drew said automatically, as if naming it would tame it. "Do you want us to go?" Lena said in the air. "Or do you want us to stay?" The answer was not yes or no. It was a ripple in the dust at our feet, as if the floor had taken a breath. Drew's light caught something printed on the walls in soot. B, and then a smear, and then May, and then below it, a date too blurred to read. I thought of men down there with lamps on their heads and mules in the endless day that they called night, and felt sorry, so suddenly and unbearably sorry, for every person who had bent their back and vanished into this earth for the sake of someone else's glow. We made the mistake that you make when it feels quiet, like a permission. We went further. At the turn before the collapse, though we didn't know it was a collapse yet, the mine opened into a long hollow chamber with the remains of timber brace that had split like a sternum. The air smelled like rooms where no one has cried yet but will. A faint current moved along the ceiling, whispering in a language that you could call wind if you needed to call it something. "Recorder picks up a tonal register here," Drew said. "You hear that? Like a G? Maybe? A low G?" "Hum with it," Mara said, and she did, a long soft note that matched the mine's throat. A sound shook something loose in me. I stepped back without meaning to. My light slid over the floor and landed in a hole maybe 3 feet across, perfectly round, filled with water clear enough that it looked like a piece of night, and it set into the earth. "Don't," Lena said, though I hadn't moved. "It looks like it goes down forever. It's probably just a sump." "Drainage," Drew said. We listened. The mine hummed back. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It was a sigh that had been happening for years and merely chose to conclude at the moment that we lent it our attention. A small rain of stone pattered down from the ceiling, near the way that we had come. We all went still because stillness felt like control. "Okay," Mara said, a little too brightly. "We're going to mark that and head back. No problem." She smiled, and it was a real smile, at each one of us in turn, like we were children on a field trip and the bus had just arrived. We turned, and the corridor that had been clear was now pinched with a rock in a color of thunderheads. "We're not trapped, but we're not free. Let's give ourselves 5 minutes," Drew said, already calculating the angles and mass as if he could persuade the geometry to soften. "I'm sorry," Lena said, as though an apology were the key. The mine hummed. We shifted a few pieces, dust rose, and I tasted an old rain. I pressed my ear to the wall to listen, as if the stone had a pulse. That's when I heard it clearly, a voice speaking a name that I had never told anyone, not even the living who think they know me. It said that the name the way my grandmother used to say it when she'd come in from the yard with skinned knees, the way I'd still not heard it since. It said it so gently, I wanted to lay my head down where the stone could hold it and be very, very still. I pulled back hard and hit my head on the brace. Bright dots burst across my eyes. Lena put a hand on my arm. "What?" she whispered. "It knows," I said, and immediately hated myself for the childness of the word. "It knows me." "Places don't know," Drew said. "Places hold. We're projecting." Mara's voice was far away and close at once. "Ask it what it wants." I did not want to, but wanting is not a strong enough lever for certain rocks. "What do you want?" I said. The answer came without a sound, a sensation like a standing at the edge of a swimming pool when you are a child and someone you trust says jump. The pool is blue and looks shallow and looks deep and looks like the world will hold you. Then it said, in the words this time, using my grandmother's voice and none of its sweetness, "Tell the truth." "About what?" Drew demanded, though I think he knew. He had a scientist's arrogance that the world should be legible. Here, that arrogance looked fragile as moth wings. "About who went first, about who followed, about who turned around and who didn't. The guilt in the mind moved like something in a mason jar you weren't ready to open." Lena made a soft sound. "My brother," she said so quietly the recorder might not have caught it. "He said he would be right behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't look back." "We're not doing this," Drew said. "We're not making a confession booth out of a geology." The mind hummed his words back to him, making them sound older and less sure. "Time to go," Mara said, and the mind, or the weight I had thought brought into it, laughed. Not a cruel laugh, a laugh like, of course you think this is the door where this is the only mirror." We worked at the pinch until the opening was big enough for one person at a time to slide through. Drew went first. He scooted on his side, and then he was gone except for his boots, and then his boots were air. "I'm through," he said. "It opens up right away. You're good." I went second because I believed in math. If Drew could fit, I could fit. Halfway through, Rux pressed my shoulder, and I had the unoriginal thought that if I died like this, it would be embarrassing. Then I was out on my knees, watching dust shape as it fell into nothing. Lena came next, breathing like she had run a race. We had reached the back from Mara's pack. "Give me the recorder first," she said, and we did. Her hand, small and sure, took it. We waited for her to follow. We waited a little longer. The mine hummed. "Mara," Lena said, "come on." No answer. I leaned in and shone my light down towards the squeezed corridor. It threw my own shadow back at me, weird and long. "Mara," I said again. "It's okay. Take your time." "I need you to ask me," she said from the other side, her voice so near the rock it was more of a vibration than a sound. "Ask me what I heard." "I heard the baby I did not have," she said in the voice she uses when she reads the names of donors, the voice that makes each syllable value. "I heard her at 6. I heard her at 10. I heard her at 20, angry and right. I heard her say there was room for both of us, only if I kept walking. Lena cried once, a single accidental note. Drew passed the heel of his hand to his eye. "Mara," he said, "come through now." "It wants me to tell the truth," Mara said. "Then it wants me to walk, but I don't know if walking means out or in." Something shifted then, a little, and the opening narrowed by a breath. I felt like change that a thread had broken. "Mara," I said, "right now." The recorder in my hand hissed softly, a sound like a dress being smoothed. The mine exhaled, and I heard Mara's weight move up, then stop. "You three go," she said. "If you stay, it will never let us go. If you leave, it might." "Not acceptable," Drew said. And for a moment, I loved him for the clean lines of his refusal. He set his shoulders to the rock. "We're not leaving you." "Please," Mara said, and the old world made anew folded all of us in the same blanket. "Please do what I ask." Afterward, we tried to decide the exact moment when we choose. Lena said that it was when the air went colder, and she thought that meant the mine was pulling us closer, and then she panicked in the way people panic underwater when they realize the surface is further than it looked. Drew said it was then when the recorder caught a second voice, a man's maybe, or the echo of the first bending back. I say it was when the truth of my worst minute, the one that I don't even name even in my head, rose up out of the hole in the floor in a single clean bubble and burst around my face, smelling of iron and childhood, and I wanted to live. We left. Or, if you need a version where we are better than we are, we didn't. Pick the one that lets you sleep. Outside, the day was still there like a gift we had not earned. Bugs sang, sunlight laid itself on the leaves as if nothing under them had just ever wanted. We stood in the hollow and let our pupils learn how to be big again. Drew bent double with his hands on his knees. Lena turned to face the sky like someone being forgiven. "Call," I said, and we did, each in our own way. Dispatch the county. A man Drew knew in the volunteer fire department. We told them what we tell strangers when we need them to come quickly and not ask who we are. By the time that we heard the first truck, the mine mouth had changed again. Not a collapse, just a settling of the resolve. Dust hung in the air, the kind that you can walk through and carry away with you forever in the lines of your palms. A man in a yellow helmet looked at the opening and said words like unstable and secondary chamber and old workings. He looked at us and did not say irresponsible, though I heard it anyways. Drew tried to go back in. The man lifted a hand. "Not yet," he said. "We do this right." We waited. The afternoon dimmed as if the sun had made a private deal with the ridge. Lena sat and put her face in her hands and did not cry again, which felt like a skill. I held the recorder like a baby, ridiculous in my tenderness toward it, as if it were a vessel for what mattered, as if anything made of parts could hold what the hollow had shown us. The man in the yellow helmet came out after not very long and shook his head with a careful slowness. "We can't proceed without risking bringing the whole thing down," he said. "We'll come back tomorrow without shoring." "What if tomorrow's too late?" I asked, and he looked at me as if I had just named the central problem of his life in the way that was no help to him at all. We went home then, not to our homes, but to the places where our bodies pretend to rest. I lay in my bed with the window open and listened to the cicadas and thought of the mine's low note, and how I'd found the frequency and matched it. Around 2 a.m, the recorder on my bedside table hissed, and Mara's voice, alive, practical, said, "Check the file." I sat up, hard a hammer, and played the last track. On it, our breath, the drip, the hum, the collapse, Drew saying, "I'm through," me saying, "It knows me." Lena's single cry, and then very clearly, without a tremor, "This is Mara at timestamp," and she gives the exact time. "If I don't walk out behind you, please know I am walking somewhere. Please know I'm not alone." She paused, a soft like a cloth, then, "There's a room past the pinch. There's air. There's a second way. There's..." Static, and then the mind sang its low note so perfectly that my chest answered it without my consent. Morning brought trucks and tape and men with purpose. The news brought microphones gentle as moths. The hollow brought itself, which is a place that can bring. You can choose your ending here too, that we found her sleeping in a pocket of air, a little gray from the rock dust but smiling, that we found only her pack and a message scratched in the coal. Tell the truth, that we found nothing that the mind refused to admit it had ever known us. Months later, sometimes I take the long way home, skirting the forest. From the road, I can't see the mouth, only the shape of the ridge that looks like a woman lying on her side. On summer evenings, the light slides off her cheek into the trees like a secret. The recorder lives in a drawer now. When I open it, it smells a little like pennies. If you came to my porch and asked me straight what happened, I would pour you something cold and say things that I have learned to say. We were 4 people in a place where the earth is thin and the underneath is thick, and then we told the truth until the truth was asked something back. If you stayed a little longer, I would add the only thing that I have said once. When the mind said jump, I wanted to. Not because I wanted to die, but because I wanted to be held by something that knew everything, and that would keep me anyways. You can believe that we left her. You can believe that she walked. You can believe that there is a room under the rooms where the people we almost were keep living. And sometimes they call up to us, and we call down. And the sound is the same, and different, and between those 2 words is where we spend the rest of our lives. Either way, if you go, bring light, bring a friend, bring a name you have never said out loud, and be ready to hear it spoken. When you come back to the bright world and the bugs are putting on their little evening show, you'll notice your own breath in a way you haven't since you were a child. It will sound like the start of a new story you will try to tell and never quite finish. Thanks, guys, for joining in. I hope that you have loved these 2 stories. Join us next episode. I think we're going to have Alligator Jackson on, and we are out of here.